Welcome back to Gotcha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about a teammate tier list for a newer character, which is going to be Epha. Now, with Epha, we're going to be taking a look at each of the teams, really looking at which one is actually going to be probably good teammates for him in each of his different teams. Now, we've come up with 3 different teams that we think are going to do pretty well with him as a character, or at least specifically for him. Now, is he going to be game breaking? Is he going to be doing this? Is he going to be doing that? That is totally separate from this video. We're purely looking at if you are looking to build and make teams for Epha, this is what you should be looking for. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. And first and foremost, you're going to see, obviously, like I said here, we have 3 different tiers. Now, these tiers are not necessarily placed one over the other. They're just colorized to kind of help a little bit. So obviously Electrocharged, we had like a little light purple. The soup team is more or less which is the Electrocharged is Epha and other hydro and electro characters. Soup team is basically just a bunch of different elements, and freeze is going to be Epha and basically just cryo and hydro. Now, with this being said, a lot of these characters can be moved around in different teams as well. So although it looks like the soup team doesn't have a lot, it's mainly just pyro characters. There is a reason for that because the rest of the characters that could be used there are also in the other categories as well.
Mhm.
Anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into Electrocharged. So we have a lot of different teams here, necessarily. A lot of different characters, I should say. And
Mhm.
there's a few that I think Rift, we have some above the others. So what are we thinking? I know we've talked about this already, but what do we think at least overall with these top few characters?
Yeah, and just to preface, these aren't, and you might have already said this, Vixen, but these aren't in any particular order. They're just here. But I think right off the bat for Electrocharge, for a lot of people, Farina is going to be one of the top candidates. So
Mm-hmm.
putting her right at the very top, and then obviously a character like Auroron because he built into it with his kit and does really good damage, even as a 4-star. Very competitive with someone like Yaimiko. So I think Yaimiko, being the kind of limited character who's designed to just do off-field electro damage is naturally going to be very high. You'll see we have characters like Raiden in here because she can technically do that. You could do a weird build where you do like a 4-piece golden troop Raiden. I'm not going to stop you, but like just keep her on emblem for your sake. But she can do that. Keep that in mind. But I think characters like Yaimiko would just be better because she's designed for it. Oron, like I said, is going to be great. Yansan's going to be a great option. We have it right there at the top because Epha really wants to have other Natlan characters in his team. If we look at some of his passives, actually, I think it's his very first passive. It says that when Epha is in the Night Soul's Blessing state, every 1 Night Soul point out of the total in the entire party will grant him 1 Rescue Essential point. Each Rescue Essential point is going to increase the swirl and electrocharge damage dealt by all nearby party members, which is why we're actually talking about electrocharge as a team archetype in the first place. It's because, similar to Auroron, Epha actually has something specific in his kit that points to increasing electrocharge damage. So already Epha and Auroron really like to be placed together. And then obviously Farina is always going to be a premier unit to use with that. And because Epha can actually heal in his kit, and by the way, if you don't know a lot about Epha's kit, we did have a pre-release talking about that. You can find that in the video page of our channel. Going back to this though, because he can heal, Farina is going to be a great teammate because the synergy of him healing, her draining, maxing out more fanfare. You've got Auroron in here. I think personally, just before we've even talked about Soup and Freeze, I feel like the Electrocharge is just going to be his most synergistic team. It's probably going to be one of the best. And that could be debatable, especially with a new character like Escoffier. And we'll get to the Freeze teams later on. But some of the other characters in here, I really like Beidou. Characters like Beidou and then Xingqiu and Yelan as well for Electrocharge, they will work because Epha is going to be doing normal attacks after he's going into his skill state. So he feels a lot like Mizuki because he's an EM-based character. He heals. He's all about just increasing the swirl damage. He's basically 4-star Mizuki. But the difference is the playstyle. He's going to actually, use the normal attacks once you are in the skill state, whereas Mizuki is just kind of AFK version where you're kind of just hovering around, which renders characters like Yelan, Xingqiu, Beidou useless because you can't activate them from off field, whereas Epha can actually use that, which is why I personally like Epha a little bit more than Mizuki, which is kind of crazy, just because he's a 4-star. But that being said, Vixen, what are some of your thoughts about Electrocharge team specifically?
Well, yeah, when we had talked about this, I originally said the only real two things that immediately hit my brain when he came into play was Electrocharge and Freeze. And the only reason Freeze really came into mind was purely because of Escoffier coming up. And like you said, I think what we both, I had stated that earlier the same way. I think Farina and Oron and Yansan with Epha is probably going to be one of his best, if not his best team. We'll have to actually see how he comes out and plays. I could be
Hmm.
totally wrong about that. That was just my initial thought when he kind of came out, with the current cast of characters. But beyond that, yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, Miko is higher up here. At that point, you'd have to throw somebody like
Hmm.
what's her name? Fischl up there. I do like Beto for the shielding, very very good. Some of the rest of the characters kind of just fall to the bottom. If anything, I would actually throw someone like Sijun a little bit higher up, just because the healing helping, so just that has a little bit more precedence than some of the other characters, and even someone like Kuki as well. Once again, just because of the things that they already do over those. That's probably how I would probably perfect like or more synergistically kind of align the characters, but that's at least how I would see them. So I pretty much
Hmm.
agree with everything that was kind of stated there. A lot of good things that's coming out of that. Now I want to actually jump to another team, but I want to skip Soup, and the reason why is because Soup is basically, as you can see, in between both the Electrocharge and Freeze, and it kind of shares a lot of the characters that you would find in
Right.
Electrocharged and in Freeze. So to an extent, you could do a lot of, and Soup is kind of just a mash of a bunch of different characters in a team of different elements. And so, honestly, taking a lot of different characters from different elements, like we were talking about before,
It's
characters like
basically all the
Shincho.
characters on the screen.
Yeah, never mind. Keep in mind, yeah, we were talking about earlier, some of the Hydra characters that are down here in the free section also could work in Electrocharge as well. Shincho,
Absolutely.
Yelan, who's in the Soup team, which I think I accidentally just placed her down there, but stuff like
Kokomi
that.
could be in the Electrocharged. That would
Right.
work.
Right. So basically, once again, these Hydro characters like Candace and even Barbara, Hydro characters that are down here can still be put in the Electrocharge teams as well.
Hmm.
But now going to the bottom team, or our bottom quote unquote team, is Freeze team. Now, obviously, the first person we're going to come into contact with in thought process is going to be Escoffier. Now, her whole idea is to have a lot of Hydro and a lot of Cryo characters, and that's kind of like the only thing there she really wants. So Aoife kind of does break up the idea of a team with, kind of breaks up that idea of only Hydro and Cryo characters, obviously, considering he's an Animo unit. But I do think that this still could be a pretty strong team. Very much like Farina,
Hmm.
she does a lot of off field damage. And so if you pair someone like Farina and Scovia here, there could still be some pretty good usability between those few characters, and definitely would kind of, throw the ability for that team at least together as well. But there's a lot of
Hmm.
other characters that can definitely show promise here. One other character before we get into the others I want to bring up still though is someone like Sitlali. Sitlali is a character that focuses in our minds mainly on the idea of melt, but keep in mind even with her using and freeze can be still helpful as well. And that's actually why she can still be used with Neuvillette, because she still has things in her kit that still help for that, because she can still decrease pyro resistance, but also and specifically, sorry, hydro resistance. So, she's
Hmm.
also getting that little bit of extra kind of touch. So that's at least something I do want to kind of keep in mind as well for us.
Absolutely. Also, if you do have her weapon, that's a very universal weapon to just buff the active character. So there's that. Also, one thing I really do like about Sitlali is out of the Hydro and Cryo roster right now, she's going to be one of the only Natlin characters that you could actually use that's going to actually be synergistic and help Aoife for that passive I talked about earlier, which is once again why Auron and the Electrocharge team was naturally really good, as well as Yansan, because once again, the more Night Soul you are using, the more that Aoife will actually buff the swirl damage, and he'll buff also electrocharge damage in the passive. But in the case of a freeze team, you'll be getting extra swirl numbers while using him on field as the driver. So most of the time, being used in these teams, the thought process is using him on 4-piece Viridescent, because he's just going to be swirling everything that's going on, so to increase the off-fielders damage like Farina, Escoffier in the freeze team. I would think the best freeze team for me would obviously keep Farina Escoffier right there. Just a lot of synergy right off the bat, a lot of damage. Aoife on field's going to swirl both Hydra and Cryo right there with them. And then that fourth slot is going to be a toss up between characters like Sitlali. You could do Shenhe. I do like the idea of Yelan because you can activate that. She would be giving a lot of, well, she's a lot of personal damage, but she would be technically buffing Aoife just a little bit there. Epha's not a lot of personal damage, but the biggest thing is that would be a lot of just
Triggering a lot of
off-field
extra
damage dealing.
effects. Yeah.
That's a lot of just sub DPS in that team, and Epha's just basically the on-field viridescent for it, as well as a healer. So that would be a very comfortable team. Kokomi feels good because she's very flexible. You can use her for a few seconds on-field to quick swap if you want to, but just being able to be the off-field healer. Honestly, there's so many comfortable options that like
Yeah.
you have. There's so many healers because Escoffier also heals. So Epha also healing already. That's already two healers. So if you use characters like Kokomi, Sijuin, and these just other healers, I mean, heck, we even have Chi-Chi in here. You could use as off-field if you just don't have all of these other limited options, and you happen to have Chi-Chi. Maybe it's in a theater scenario. That can definitely work. And also to get on some of these 4 stars, I really like the idea of Kaya, especially if you have a good energy build on him, just constant cryo application. So there's a lot of different things you can do. I think it just ultimately comes down to if you have Escoffier, she kind of becomes a must for a freeze team because she's buffing everything, every kind of damage that a freeze team is doing. Because even with Epha as an on-fielder, he's going to be swirling and buffing Hydro Cryo with Viridescent. And so that's going to buff Escoffier as well as all the other characters. Escoffier is buffing those other characters. So I really like characters like, obviously, Farina, Escoffier, and then Sitlali, Yelan. That's where I stand.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much a given for most of the cast. Keep in mind when you use Farina, the HP drain is something to keep in mind, and I'm not exactly sure how solid Aoife's healing is, but keep in mind that also Escoffier, I believe, is a healer as well. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
there's some other things that can counteract that as well. And technically, I guess if you're getting hit and you have Xingqiu's ult out, that's also a little bit of heals. You're just trying to counteract the HP drain that Farina gives at that point. So, once again, a few of the characters, even Sijuin, actually, who's in the Electrocharged section, could also be thrown down in the free section. So that's also something to keep in mind. But yeah, I think everything you said is pretty solid. Either throw some extra shielders in there, some extra characters for extra things. But definitely the top team for that is probably including Farina and Escoffier with some other combination of another character in there.
On a side
Beyond that,
tangent, I really like Sijuin with the Farina Escoffier dynamic
because of
because
the
they're
skill
both heavy on
damage.
skill damage. And
Yeah.
yeah, Sijuin's buffing skill damage. It's just kind of as a side tangent that might be really cool.
Yeah. Plus, once again, another healer in the team to counteract. So there's a lot of good positives there. Lastly, we have Soup Team. Now, I know this only has basically Pyro characters in here, and I do have both Travelers in here because I'm using them because I don't want somebody to get mad at me if I only put Ether or only put Lumine. So both of them are in there, and they're both signaling the Pyro Traveler because I didn't know that there are any other Travelers because they're... anyways, yeah, so basically... the other the other characters basically in this lineup though are only Pyro. But like I said before, technically you could swap really any of the other units that are in the Electrocharge in the free section into the Soup team as well to just kind of do for a fun team. Now, in terms of a quote unquote best team, I mean, if we're really being disgusting about it, if you
You can't
are
get rid of Farina. Sorry.
you can
You
no, you
just
can't
can't.
get rid of Farina, and at that point you have Mawika, which
Yeah.
everybody's
You
best
would you would
team
have
includes
to.
Mawika, of course. And then, you're either slotting in Bennett or you're slotting in Sitlali for melts. Once again,
I would think Sit Lolly
the entire idea
personally.
behind Mizuki and the entire idea behind another character like Mizuki and Epha is that you're like you were talking about before, like we were talking about with the freeze team, is that and even Electrocharge, you're focusing on the other characters doing a lot of damage, and you're having Epha
Hmm.
kind of be the gateway for that. And like you said before, Epha just kind of almost does it better because he just goes so hard into that. Whereas Mizuki is kind of like a jack of all trades, but is not good at anything really. So at least he's kind of specific in that instance of doing what
Hmm.
he does, and he's very focused in that. So I think that in the terms of the Pyro characters though in that lineup, I would think that obviously Mawika is probably at the top. Depending on how much
Yes.
he's moving, Bennett could be a little bit of an annoyance. But I think that because he's got those
Hmm.
range attacks, it wouldn't be that bad, considering you could just kind of sit inside Bennett's burst and shoot from
Yeah, my
afar.
initial worry with Bennett is just Aoife's personal damage. Is it worth to actually try to use Bennett to buff Aoife? Because
Right.
if his damage is, I would think he does similar to Mizuki or worse because he's a 4 star. I don't see it. If it's better, I don't. it can't be that much better, right? So is
Right.
it even worth to take out any other character just to use Bennett? And even if it's not for the buff, it's like, oh well, he's a healer. Well, Epha is the healer too, you know.
Right.
So you've already
There are
got
some
that.
interesting things, yeah, for sure to think
Yeah,
about there.
I would think Sitlolly because it's another Natlan character. It's gonna allow Mawika in the middle of rotation to melt. She can be the scroll user.
Right, but in
So
terms of pyro characters, I think the
there's a lot of
backup
options just with
to
soup.
in terms of like soup, obviously we've already kind of talked about the better team that would probably work. But in terms of the pyro character you'd probably use, I, this is
Dia
what
would feel good.
I'm gonna kind of go something like this. Um, I don't know if that really makes too much sense. And my kind of thought process quickly here is obviously Malika strong. Dia, the resistance, interruption is high. Plus her off
Hmm.
field is, it's not crazy, but it's still there, I guess. So if you throw Siegeman in there, once again, another character that's increasing the skill damage, I
Hmm.
guess. A Pyro Traveler, another Natlan using character, or a Night Soul using character. So
Right.
that's
With
also
good
something that could work.
constellations, that's free to play.
Right,
The
and good
C6
damage
does
as well
give
coming
free
from that
damage.
character. Yeah.
Exactly.
Xiangling's under them purely because the other characters are skill based, and Xiangling has energy issues, and that
Yeah.
can sometimes be a problem, especially if rotations are a little bit weird. And then a character like Bennett is the exact same reason we talked about before. He's really just healing. He's purely only there because of Farina. And I know people are gonna be, what about the attack boost? I know, but he's really only there for the healing to counteract the Farina.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
don't like Bennett there. I will say I do like Toma better than even Xiangling just because he is based off of normal attacks, similar to Yelan Xingqiu Beidou. And, Aoife's going to be doing that. So I would think, at least in theory, Toma would be. I'd like it better because at least you're not going to have the major energy problem. You could also just go shield bot mode because we also don't really know too much about. We know that with his skill, he's going to go into the air. How much interruption resistance is he going to want? Is he going to be thrown around a lot like Wanderer, or is he going to be more like Chaska, where he seems to not be thrown around a lot? Is he going to need the interruption resistance? Because based on that, when he does release, that's going to raise value if he does need it. It's going to raise value for characters like Dia and shielders like Sit. We go back to Sitlolly, HP build Toma, and just other shielders in general.
yeah, no, that's true. I mean, you go back to Beto, you go back to Diona and
Layla,
Layla.
yeah, for the
Yeah,
freeze, yeah.
Leilu. But yeah, I think overall, it's an interesting one. I'm sure people are not going to be very happy with us putting Xiangling under Toma, but build the bridge and get over it. So I
Hmm.
think overall, though, once again, this soup team really just comes down to kind of mix and match characters. Aoife is one of those characters where it seems like he's going to be a fun character to play, not necessarily a
Yeah,
meta character to play.
Overworld will be
And
fun.
so nitpicking on the teams is probably not going to be. It's going to be easy, but it's not going to be a fun time. That's for sure. I think
Yeah. I
that's
think
one
the
way to say
biggest
it.
takeaway for him is that, like you said, fun character for overworld stuff like that.
Imaginary
Um,
theater.
I was gonna say Imaginary Theater. It's gonna be definitely easier when there's animo, allowed. Because he's so flexible. You can pretty much every character on the screen here you can use with him. Uh, bec- Obviously with the different tiers you're seeing, that's us talking, okay, specifically electrocharged, specifically freeze. But when it comes to soup, this is like all of them because that's the idea of soup. You just throw everything in the pot and mix it in, call it a day. And if Aoife is using four-piece Viridescent, no matter who you throw in there, if they are semi-damage dealers or just straight up heavy damage dealers like Farina, Escoffier, etc., he's going to be buffing them because chances are you're swirling every element you throw in that team.
Interesting character overall. I think in general, and it's very similar to how you would be building
Hmm.
Mizuki. We didn't bring up like a pure Animo team or anything like that. I think that
Yeah.
for what we've seen and what we can really do right now, this seems like it's going to be the better team. So no C6 Farazan brought
I
in
think
this
a
video.
Sucrose would actually be better off as a straight Animo DPS, just off of her own scalings than a character like this or even Mizuki. They just don't go into that kind of thing.
Either way, though, that's basically our teammate tier list over looking at Aoife. If you guys do have any other thoughts, any other ideas, maybe some things that you guys thought, well, okay, I know you guys talked about Electrocharge, Souped, and Freeze, but I had this really cool idea for this team. Let us know down in the comments. We'd love to look a bit further into the character. We've kind of taken some time to maybe think that these are the top 3 teams, and we know there are probably more teams that could be made outside of these. We just really didn't think to talk about them because we kind of wanted to bring the top teams that probably are going to work best with him. But if you guys have any other ideas, go ahead and let us know down in the comments. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Check out the other content on our channel as well. Also check out our Discord as well if you guys want to talk to us more. We're going to be there a little bit more as well. Thank you guys though for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.